Sacred garden culture. 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 Sacred garden culture.
And those who have actually been entrapped within a parallel that they can sense and feel is totally and absolutely opposed to the sacred ancestral order that they hear being spoken from the I and I. And they, in fact, feel and sense that there's something being taught about this first Genesis tribe that needs to be paid close attention to. So many have said they can sense and see that there need to be a holistic living change. They say they do not comprehend how this is going to happen because it's conflicting with everything within their brain, and they know something is wrong. And so the response is, High Priest, I'm not clear.
High Priest Kwatamani, Supreme Soothsayer, Soul Seer, Spiritual Healer and Revealer, Chief Elder of the Kwatamani First Genesis Tribe, the oldest, longest sustained, raw and living, plant fuel consuming, family community order known. Over half a century and still going strong in the tropical rainforest.
We have encountered so many youth and others, but our primary focus is on the youth who have said they find the teachings of the I and this divine socio-economic family community order, the Kwatamani First Genesis Tribe, to be so interesting. And those who have actually been entrapped within a parallel that they can sense and feel is totally and absolutely opposed to the sacred ancestral order that they hear being spoken from the I and they, in fact, feel and sense that there's something being taught about this first Genesis tribe that needs to be paid close attention to. In fact, we've had many youth ask or even beg that the I please take time and include them in some of the teachings. The resounding response is, I've listened to the presentations and it is so interesting. You can hear and sense the facts, the historical facts, the data. You can feel and sense the various elements that you're speaking about when you talk about the fact that the whole foundation of the social, economic, political, and religious structure, the foundation of the educational system, is built on a nature that totally and absolutely opposes the natural innate order of the divine children of the sun and the sacred garden culture from which we come.
As green earth solar conscious beings.
So many have said they can sense and see that there need to be a holistic living change. They say they do not comprehend how this is going to happen because it's conflicting with everything within their brain, and they know something is wrong. And so the response is, High Priest, I'm not clear about the teachings. I'm not clear about the reasoning. I'm not clear about how to go through this detox, purging, and healing. I'm not clear about how I am going to transition from one lifestyle to another lifestyle when all I have known has been this particular way of life. All that I have known is what has been given to I by my parents, and all they knew was the same thing, and all the parents before that knew was the same thing. And when you track and trace it for us, what becomes very clear is that it has been master programmed within a social phenomena built on a supremacist ideology that conflicts with the natural innate state of being of man, he, and she.
Divine intervention of the most high plan.
The most supreme unseen said,
it is so clear that man, he and she were birthed as divine children of the sun. We see it in the base, root, and foundation of the teachings that we are, in fact, first Genesis offsprings. That as first Genesis offsprings, we were obviously melanin encoded. And the fuel that we consumed was melanin encoded fuel, the fruits of the tree of life. And we see very clear that, in fact, the wholesome reasoning of such a thing just makes sense. If you have factors in your body that's able to consume life energy and turn it into fuel, then it becomes very clear when you reason with what you're teaching that, in fact, we have to consume of living energy to maintain the living infrastructure of life. Otherwise, we will actually perpetuate dead, devitalized, and depleted thoughts and reasonings and actions. And that will lead us to self-destruction. It will break the codes of soul-to-soul relationship. It will bend the spirit essence of our existence into a state that will fuel, that will feed the spirit of toxic disorder. So many say that we comprehend that you're saying there are two different natures of energy, divine order and toxic reality, the chaotic reality of a self-centered individualistic nature.
Quote, reference sources are in place for those who need to do a little more homework and research in order to come to a phase of greater clarity regarding the urgent need for divine social economic family community order. We are addressing those children of the sun who have come to their personal fork in the road and who have made a decision that the toxic parallel and its death culture are no longer acceptable or desirable or tolerable. End of quote. Page 449 from the prophetic 12,594 year Banu cycle, encoding the consciousness of higher peace through the divine union of masculine and feminine energy, Book 1 by High Priest Kwatamani.
We hear very clear when you say that there is no denial about that one God who was a vengeful God, a God of envious jealousy, war, and spite, who said, there shall be no other before I. It is very clear. You've made it very clear that what we're actually dealing with is the state and condition of a master program that have man, he, and she in a spiritual war, conflicting and confusing state of existence that actually denies our natural and innate state of coming to be. And that is stated very clearly within the Genesis 1. You pointed it out so profoundly that, in fact, in the beginning, the most supreme, seen and unseen essence of masculine and feminine energy, unseen, manifested upon the scene within the earthly presence and said, let us make man, he and she, in our own image. And that image was he and she, because the origin was clearly he and she, in order to perpetuate he and she. Just like if you want divine, natural, and innate thought and reasoning and action, you're going to have to deal with divine, natural, and innate facts of life that you will have to consume whole life energy if you want to perpetuate whole life energy. Common sense. And when these youth speak to us and say, the only problem I have is that when I began to reason with these facts of life, something clicks inside of my head to say, wait, but I'm not clear. What the I and I have come to reason with It must be frustrating as can be for a being born, bred, and spoon-fed within a social, economic, political, religious order that perpetuates self-centered individualism as a way of life, to have to confront the fact that all that has been taught, all that has been master programmed within you and those ancestors before you in all recent time has been contaminated with a nature of energy totally and absolutely opposed to your sacred ancestral existence as a child of the sun. Totally and absolutely opposed to the natural innate order from which you come as a first Genesis, offspring and breed of man, he and she. Totally opposed to the sacred garden culture from which you come. Totally opposed to any vibration or sensation that do not perpetuate self-centered individualism, that do not perpetuate the ideology of I, me, my, mine, that do not uphold and maintain the infrastructure of being single family households, or of being in a household that separates as an individual unit instead of maintaining a holistic living family communal order that actually safeguards the women and the children regardless of the circumstances that he and she face in life. How frustrating can it be for an individual to begin to see, sense, and feel a state and conditioning of thought and reason and action that will cause a massive change in every thought that they have, a massive change in their whole lifestyle, and have no other connection with such a lifestyle of thinking and reasoning, and yet feel a urge, a soul to soul push to connect with it. It must be frustrating as can be. How are you going to be clear about the fact that man, he and she, have a divine, natural, and innate duty, obligation, and responsibility to uphold and maintain the principles, morals, and values of divine social, economic, family, community order as a holistic living way of life to safeguard the existence of humanity? How are you going to be clear? How are you going to be clear that the natural and innate state of consumption is raw, living fruits, vegetables, seeds, nuts, herbs, and spice? That is to say that living foods is a natural and innate state of reasoning with holistic living truth for a living being. When we say living beings, we're talking about humanity and the natural and innate state of man, he and she, as first Genesis offspring.
Sacred garden culture. Sacred garden culture.
And we come to realize that man, he and she, was not birthed to be hunting, herding, warring predators. That however, because of circumstances and environmental facts that did indeed occur, devolved into a lower and lesser state where the consumption of dead, devitalized, and depleted fuel consumption became a survival motif. How are you going to be clear about the fact that in order for man, he and she, to resurrect from that state and condition that actually breeds, seeds, and feeds conflict, confusion, and chaos as a way of life, that actually thrives and survives on blood spill and the thrill of the kill, that actually perpetuates war, sexual violation, crime? How are you going to be clear that these facts are completely out of sync and out of focus with a holistic living existence, and that to continue to uphold and maintain that state of being will indeed be a guarantee of self-destruction. How are you going to be clear? How are you going to be clear about the fact that we must enter into a stage of detoxing and purging to heal if we expect to recover from this toxic and foul state and condition that man, he and she has been master programmed into, have been forced and coerced into, and have in fact assimilated, integrated, and adopted these particular disorders as a way of life. And within that state and condition, how can that individual expect to be clear? I mean, clear holistically. How can that individual expect to uphold and maintain a frame of thought and reasoning and action that will breed, seed, and feed a new consciousness of man, he and she? Mother Earth is crying for whole life change, and we must be the change to see the change. And in fact, it is a natural and innate requirement for our existence to uphold and maintain, accelerate divine social, economic, family, community order. How are you going to be clear? How are you going to be clear? How are you going to be clear if you came from parents who are not clear and actually settled for whatever was given to them, creating a whole different kind of being? Seeing so many looking and acting and thinking and reasoning exactly as they do, he and she. Knowing that if that is the case, they are normal. So how can you be clear if you have been placed into a social order that creates a normality out of self-deified individualism? A normality where you live your life for material stuff and things and fantasies, delusions, illusions, and dreams of having I knew this, I knew that. Not thinking about the fact that you have to detox that old this and old that was infused into your mind so that you can get into a new this and a new that about your way of thinking and reasoning and actions that will uplift your soul so that you can forward the holistic living resurrection of who you be as a child of the sun and pass that on into the next generation. We're talking about finding a way and mean to be clear, not about that toxic parallel. No, that one has placed a spell on you. And there is where you have dwelled, and those before you and before you and before you, ever since the intrusion and invasion came upon you and made it very clear that by the grace of their deity, by the grace of their God, that you will be reduced into a perpetual state of mental, physical, and spiritual enslavement under the guise and disguise of self-righteous conflict, confusion, and chaos. Self-righteous deception, a focus that will keep you in a divided, conquered, and separated state all the days of your life. That's when it is said, until perpetuity. However, until or unless a miraculous occurrence happens. And that miraculous occurrence cannot manifest without the divine union of masculine and feminine energy. It cannot happen if we cannot bond he and she into a sacred ancestral oneness with a focus on resurrecting the divine children of the sun within the sacred God and culture presence from which we come as green earth solar conscious beings. So here's where we want to focus. We've laid an entire series out for those who really, really sincerely want to be clear, to take time and listen 3 times, one for the brain, one for the body, and one for the spirit, so that if you really, seriously, and wholeheartedly want to be clear, it is a guarantee that divine clarity will manifest. If you truly want to be clear. I pause here because The priestess behind the camera has a deep-seated expression. Let's listen.
There's a whole different dimension to clarity and comprehension based on the teachings of the High Priest Kwatamani. And these teachings aren't new. These teachings have been preserved through time in ancient, sacred, ancestral, spiritual systems that all hold a seed of clarity and comprehension about one basic fact. We, as living beings, are connected to each other. We're related to each other. We depend on each other, and we come from a unified origin, a supreme source of living energy. And I just realized today, when I have said, I don't comprehend, I'm not clear, that truly there is something inside that is fighting to maintain a confused state of mind, to keep me in a depressed and frustrated state of emotional upset. Why? Because there are only two energy sources, two different natures of energy that fuel our existence. And you can feel the difference. Yes, you can sense the difference in the thoughts, in the reasoning, in the actions. Frustration versus clarity. Confusion versus comprehension. And to be honest, you really can't have clarity in a chaotic state of mind, fueling off a chaotic nature of energy, because it's always so unpredictable, unstable, ready to react over any little thing, because it's a depleted energy, depleting lower and lesser misery, seeking company to feed on more misery. Yes, I got clear on that much because I was able to comprehend at least how I feel inside. And instead of blaming somebody or something else as the cause or the reason for how I feel, I went to the source. It's got to be the energy. And the only reason I wasn't clear on this, or I wasn't comprehending this before, is because I was still in some phase or stage of the spiritual war, where the emotions were the energy in motion that helped me to discern what the High Priest Kwatamani has been talking about ever since. Two different natures of energy. When you work to get clear with a focus on comprehending the holistic living truth, that predatory, oppositional nature that sucks on your life energy like a parasite is threatened with exposure for you to see what's going on inside you. And it's an easy way to flip it. You just change the channels in the voice that's speaking. Instead of saying, I'm not clear, I don't comprehend, you could easily have a little divine humility and say, I am seeking clarity. I am seeking greater comprehension. Yeah, like I said, whole life reality is a whole different dimension. The High Priest calls it the divine parallel.
Comprehension and clarity is a very serious matter. What's often overlooked is comprehension and clarity is a requirement of each and every living being. Sometimes there are those who think because they are birthed within let's say, a social, economic, family, community order, that there is no longer a requirement for them, he or she, to have to focus on comprehension and clarity. So the vibration is, that's for those other people. It is not for us. The result is that one who's actually born, bred, and spoon-fed within a social order that focus on elevating ancestral comprehension and clarity can actually become more lost and astray in the mind than an individual who's from the external lifestyle and have seen the levels and degree of conflict, confusion, and chaos and have decided They don't want no more of it. Whereas those who are born and bred and spoon-fed within and among parents who have given all he or she can to give them the greatest level and degree of clarity so they will not slip down that slippery road of a lower and lesser state of conscious thinking, reasoning, and action. As a matter of fact, what has become a great lesson plan, oftentimes those individuals become even more steeped deep into that nature of conflict, confusion, and chaos than those who have seen it and don't want no more of it, and sick and tired of being sick and tired of being sick and tired of it, and give their mental, physical, and spiritual essence to focus on detox, purging, and healing. What the I said is that detox, purging, and healing is a requirement of each and every being. Those offsprings of the I have a deep-seated requirement to detox, purge, and heal because the parents actually were contaminated with that nature of energy that perpetuates self-deifying individualism. And they were focused on the physical elements of life. What you look like, what color your eyes are, what your hair look like, how your hips roll, what your behind look like. And none of that actually wholeheartedly and sincerely has anything to do with resurrecting divine social, economic, family, community order. Now, it may be an asset to have a strong and vibrant body temple, physical structure, yes. However, one cannot look and determine the mental, physical, and spiritual health, safety, and well-being of that individual. Therefore, detoxing and purging to heal is a requirement of each and every being who seek to connect with his or her sacred ancestral order as a divine child of the sun, emerging within the sacred garden culture presence from which we come. It is not that one plant trees or plant these things that make one an expression of that first Genesis offspring. No. An expression of that first Genesis reality. No. It is about a holistic living way of life, where you give honor, all due praise, thanks, and appreciation to the principles of Ma'at, comprehending that karma is extremely serious. For those who do not comprehend, who are not clear, they're not clear about the principles of Ma'at. Simple. What you put out is determined by what you have put in. When you go on internet or those social media platforms and etc., and you begin to think that those presentations are the expression of a new age of consciousness and etc., and have no idea as to what kind of being you're dealing with, you are indulging in a state and condition of conflict, confusion, and chaos. Those platforms are actually designed to draw you in. And that nature that diametrically opposed divine order knows full well that that is the space and place for those individuals who are losing their connection with being a part and parcel of a holistic living expression of life, connecting with the family, with the community, with the order, having a space and place to sit down and gather to discuss different factors that will help to create a greater sense of conscious reasoning for each and every one. What occurs is once the being has gotten indulged in that toxic parallel, its attitudes, values, behaviors, and beliefs, the being grows to a state of consciousness of actually believing that the grass is greener in the toxic parallel. And that those who are within divine social, economic, family, community order are behind in time, that they're old school, that they're out of sync and out of focus with what is going on in these modern days and times. And the being is headed for the surprise of his and her life as they meet up with the full-blown energy of that nature that stands opposed to divine social, economic, family, community order. And over time, that being becomes just as frustrated, becomes, I'm not clear, because they have been bred within a social consciousness that perpetuated holistic living, plant consuming, family communal union, the bonding of man, he and she. And then they get into those relationships, and that is a total foreign item to whoever that partner is. And so often, the eye and I have seen the most frustrated and irritated and aggravated being those who have had that golden opportunity to have parents who focus their energy on their holistic living resurrection, coming to full recognition that, hey, we're talking two different parallels. Divine order, toxic reality, two different parallels. And within those two different parallels, you don't meet in the middle and decide that you'll get the best of both worlds. And that's the game plan. Detoxing and purging to heal is an absolute requirement of each and every being, because that being was not born a self-deified, individualistic being. That being was born of parents. This is why it becomes so absolutely necessary for we at this particular point in time to look, listen, learn, and discern every being that we encounter who have a desire to connect, so that we know where that being is coming from, mentally, physically, and spiritually, where that being's family trace line came, led to, and is going. So that one's DNA factor becomes a clear-cut comprehension. So we'll know where that being is. If not, the only thing that happens is we go from the supreme circle of life into a vicious circle of toxic disorder, thinking that it's all the same. Because we don't have a whole lot of people to choose from within divine social, economic, family, community order. And there's a greater sense of choice about physicality, about materialism. There's no question about that. About things and stuff. And those attract the being when the being becomes lost in conflict and confusion and chaotic reasoning, when one becomes indoctrinated into a parallel that pushes the idea to that being: be your own man, be your own self. You should not function under somebody else's manhood. You don't have to be stuck under some male. That's the feminine expression of it. And what it all boils down to is the manifestation of a nature of energy totally opposed to divine social, economic, family, community order. Be clear about that, and you will have established the greatest level and degree of clarity that you need to get a greater comprehension on your decision that you must make in your life at this particular point in time to connect with the holistic living essence of life and supreme love. Because we're definitely greater than one self-centered being. And we're part of a collective whole, collective conscious communal order will be our salvation.
A new day has begun.
Yeah, it's a new day. Masculine and feminine energy. Most supreme, nothing less than giving us this opportunity of the he and she of man, the most